Welcome and thank you to a very special edition of Webinar Wednesdays. We're so excited that over 100 people have signed up for today's conversation with Ben-Gurion University of the Negev's President, Professor Daniel Chamovitz. My name is Andrea Freedman, and I'm proud to serve as the CEO of BGU Canada. On October 7th, a modern-day pogrom occurred, and since then, there has been so much pain. The pain is ever present at BGU when we think about hostage Noa Argamani. We all know her picture. We saw the horrific video of her being taken captive into Hamas. We know her story. We know that her mother, who's terminally ill's dying wish is to see her daughter one more time. Since the resumption of classes on December 31st, Noa's classmates reserve a seat for her each and every day, hoping and praying for the day she can return and join them in school. The absence of Noa, the murdered members of the BGU community, and the reservists still serving and fighting for the Jewish homeland is keenly felt. But thanks to absolutely inspiring leaders, none more so than our guest here today, Professor Daniel Chamovitz, the president of Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, many students are finally back where they should be, in the classroom. Professor Chamovitz, Danny, thank you so much for making the time for us today, and welcome.
Thanks very much, Andrea. It's a pleasure being with you, albeit virtually. And as you know, it's always a pleasure for me to be with a BGU Canada.
Thank you. You know what? Let's start on October 7th. Where were you when you first heard about what had happened, and what were your first thoughts? How did you begin to set and conceptualize priorities?
Saturday morning, we were all woken up by the air raid sirens. A bit disconcerting and shocking because no one saw it or heard it coming, but we've done that before. But two things started making me realize that things were a little different. One is I have a chat group with a group of male friends. One of them who lives on kibbutz near and anytime that there's anything going on, we say, what's going on? How's things going? And all of a sudden, Sam was saying, about 7:30, says, it's really up here. I'm hearing small arms fire, not sure what's going on. And so, we're saying, what's going on? Please update. And then he stops updating. He goes silent. And then we kept saying, Sam, what's going on? Sam, what's going on? And then I founded a new chat group that's called Friends Worried About Sam without him in the group, because I said, the fact that we keep asking what's going on isn't going to help much. And, when he can, he'll write back to us. He was offline for 3 hours to the kibbutz near That's where the head of security realized what was going on and shut off the electricity to the kibbutz so that they couldn't open the gate, and therefore he lost all his internet. And he was rescued about 8 hours later. The second thing was that around 8:30 in the morning, when we're watching the news trying to figure out what's going on, and you see the white pickup trucks in Sderot, and you sort of have a feeling like you're watching a bad movie, some type of action movie. How could there be Hamas terrorists in Sderot? It reminded me of the feeling of where I was on September 11th, which was I was in the Vienna airport switching planes, walking from one plane to the other, and I see people looking around televisions, and all of a sudden there's a plane going into the World Trade Center. So I'm trying to figure out what horror movie is this that I didn't see. And, it's a great movie. It's almost real life action, not believing what we were seeing. So I think that was sort of the feeling on October 7th, not believing what we were seeing. But it was actually at that moment, I think around 9 or 10 a.m., where I wrote my first letter to the Ben-Gurion University community saying, I'm sure you're all worried and what's going on. There was such understatement in that letter. I wish I could just get it up right now for you. I'm saying, I promise to update you as soon as possible, and we're doing everything in our power to assure the safety of our students and our staff. That was around 9 in the morning on Saturday.
Wow. First of all, Danny, I'm happy that your friend Sam is safe. And I'm glad you brought up the letter that you wrote, because I think for us in Canada, and quite frankly, for people who care about BGU around the world, your words really touched us. Your words really helped frame an absolutely incomprehensible event for us. So I wanna thank you for that, because I'm not sure that you understand how impactful they were to people around the world. Um,
Well, I'm starting to understand, so I'm getting a lot of feedback. But for me, what started as, first of all, I need to let you know what's going on, very quickly morphed into a type of self-therapy. It was a way of me taking stock of my days, and actually by you reading the letters and giving me positive feedback, you were helping me process myself what was going on.
I mean, that's good to know, because I think a lot of us are curious to understand how you managed to balance your emotions of that day with your extensive responsibility for the BGU community. You've got, 20,000 students, tons of faculty, and you're responsible for them. How do you balance your own personal emotions with your responsibilities?
Interesting question. I think well, it's unfortunately it's practice. We've been through I've been president now for 5 years and 1.5 months, not that I'm counting. Um, and think about what we've gone through over those 5+ years. We had our first missile attack at Beersheba, and I have some of the shrapnel proudly shown in my office. Just a few months into my tenure as president. We have the protocols in place for dealing with emergency situations. And personally, what I felt was a really positive type of tunnel vision, that we knew that we had a job to do. I was president of the university, responsible for my students, responsible for my workers, and I have responsibility for communicating to our supporters around the world. And so we already had that emergency group meeting already at 8 a.m. to make the first decision, which was to close the university, that the university was not going to be open on Sunday, the 8th. And later that day, we made the next decision that we were not going to start the academic year, obviously, for the day afterward. So we're used to making these decisions, but in times of crisis, you don't have the prerogative of going, oy vavoy. You have to act. And the other thing is, you don't really know how you're going to act under those situations until it comes. For anyone who's been in the army, I mean, or if you're looking at the brave soldiers, if you don't really know how someone is going to act under fire until they're under fire. If Mark Mendelson was still here with us, he would tell you about his days as the paratrooper. You can go through all the training you want, but until you're actually under fire, you have no idea how you're going to be responding. And in retrospect, I'm very proud of the way we as a university responded.
I think you should be proud, and I think all of us here in Canada are proud of you as well, because you're right. You don't know how you'll be able to respond until you're tested, and you were tested, and the response is so crystal clear. It's actually an excellent segue to some of the students. I was just in Israel, and I was in absolute awe and totally inspired by what some of them have been able to accomplish to support their fellow citizens to October 7th. Maybe you could share with us a few of your favorite stories.
Aren't they great?
Of this. They're
again,
amazing.
This again is a perfect example that you don't know what's going to happen till it happens. So we start on October 7th itself. The missiles are in, and we need to remember that on October 7th, we did not know, even at the end of the day, that 1,200 people had been killed. We didn't know that number 1,200 for another week and a half or 2 weeks. The numbers were slowly coming out. So we didn't have, in retrospect, you're saying, how are you doing all this? We had no grasp of the situation, that it was so massive. We didn't know that so many had been kidnapped. So maybe in retrospect, that helped us in our dealing with the situation, because the reality was so awful that maybe if we had grasped the scope of the reality, maybe we would have frozen. But on that first day, on October 8th, as the missiles are coming in and the first news is coming out, 500 of our students descended on Soroka University Hospital, which is part of Ben-Gurion University, as volunteers. And these were not only medical students, they were also social workers and emergency medicine students and psychology students. Whereas while the sixth-year medical students, of course, were working in the emergency room doing triage. I mean, upwards of 800, 900 wounded, in retrospect, including not a small number of terrorists, came into the emergency room that day. And then add on to that thousands of family members who are either of the wounded or people coming looking for their children who aren't answering their phones. And so these other students were working the families outside, providing the support, taking the information. Now, I'd like to say that I did a public call and said, yes, come and help. You know, we need you to come, that this was all my idea. But we didn't have to. The students did that of their own volition. And then already on Monday, our students had set up distribution centers in Beersheba to distribute clothes, food, diapers, toiletries, toys to both the displaced people, of which there were thousands, and for the reservists, as the army wasn't equipped to do this. So, for example, in this huge distribution center, which was housed temporarily in a wedding hall before we moved it into the university, there were students of ours from engineering, from industrial engineering, who developed an application for soldiers to basically, it was sort of like an IDF reservist Wolt that you could send a WhatsApp and get food delivered to wherever you were in waiting around the Gaza Strip. Or if you needed a bed, or if you needed socks, or, you know, and it was just amazing. And then drivers came and volunteered. It was just hundreds of students and other citizens of Beersheba.
You know, you said that you didn't have to put out a call for action, and that's very true. But by the same token, is there something special about the BGU community that prompted so many students and so many faculty to rise up and take charge of the situation? What is it about the DNA of BGU?
Well, thank you for using the word DNA. You know, in my spare time, I'm a geneticist, and there is something encoded in the Ben-Gurion DNA, which is a call to action and a call to responsibility. And I believe it actually comes from the essence of David Ben-Gurion, who believed in the power of the impossible, right? And so this taking, what is Zionism at its essence? It's the Jewish people taking responsibility for themselves and for their future. It's saying you're not going to wait for someone to solve your problems. We're going to take responsibility for ourselves. And at Ben-Gurion University, that means that our students aren't crying, solve our problems. They're taking responsibility for themselves and for the greater community.
Which is incredible. I do want to remind everybody, while I've certainly prepared questions and can talk to Danny all day, we are happy to take questions from people who have joined us today. Just put it in the Q&A and I will do my best to get back to it. You know, as we're talking, it strikes me that we're going a little bit back and forth. We're going from the pain to the inspiration to the resilience. And I think that that's how Israel is feeling and functioning right now. Talk to us a little bit more about some of those pain points, about running a university in those early days, but also having to go to funerals and to shivas and to visiting with displaced persons. Help us understand kind of what you had to go through as a leader to meet with those people and what those families were experiencing.
On that Shabbat, on Simchat Torah, I got the first news of a death in our community, which was the daughter and son-in-law of Professor Ilan Troen. Some of you were present at the incredibly difficult webinar that he gave describing hearing his grandson who was being hidden under his parents' bodies and talking to saying, "Grandpa, now what do I do? Mom and dad are dead." I had made the decision on Saturday that I was going to go to every funeral. That's the least I could do as president. On Sunday, on Monday, I realized that I was no way going to be able to go to every funeral, but that I was going to have to go to every Shiva. And actually on Sunday, where the university was closed, we had a meeting of the university administration, senior administration, and we developed a new protocol for the university, which is a mourning protocol. I mean, we have protocols for lots of things in academia. We're very good at being bureaucratic, but we had to make the decision, who are we counting? You know, when we're talking about people dying in the community, does Ilan Troen's daughter count? She's not a student and she's not a faculty member, but do we count children? Do we count parents? You know, do we count alumni? Who are we going to visit? Who are we going to lenachem, to console? So we decided that we are counting students, employees, academic and administrative, of course, retirees, and first family members of all employees. Because if we went to first family members of all students, we would get, and all alumni, the numbers would be off the chart. And in the end, right now, the number after the end of the second week, we were up to 75 who were killed on that day. And now, including the war, we're over 100, unfortunately.
Oh,
but
wow.
I found myself for those first 2 weeks, going from Shiva to Shiva to Shiva. And we had a committee that would decide, we would divvy out which of my vice presidents or the rector or the vice rectors were going to go to which funeral. And remember, these are not only in the Beersheba area, they're all over the country. There was one day where I started in the Dead Sea, that were all the kibbutzes from Berry. Kibbutz Berry were staying at a hotel in the Dead Sea, went from there to Dimona, from there to Rishon LeZion, from there to Netanya, and from there to Afula. You know, it was just, it was a tiyul, a trip of mourning. And while in the beginning, I wasn't sure, do I really need to be going to every parent? You know, I didn't know their children. Who am I? You know, they're in so much pain. I'll just share with you one story which showed the importance of the university in this process. Unfortunately, I don't remember the student's first name right now. It'll come to me in a second. He was a student of hotel and leisure management from Dimona. He was what we call first generation to higher education. His parents were North African immigrants, a large family. He's the oldest of 5 or 6 siblings. And so the Shiva, you know, there are huge numbers of people at the Shiva. And I walk in, the father, a big guy, very big round chest. And I said, I'm the president of Ben-Gurion University. And he starts shaking my hand and saying how proud he was of his son. And he was the first one to go to university. And I just blurted out that I promise you that your son is going to get a diploma at the graduation, and you'll have your son's diploma. I don't actually have the authority to do that. And he broke into tears, started hugging me, his head here, crying, sobbing in heaves, that how important it was for him that he would have his son's diploma. And then he took me by the hand, sat me down next to him, moved people away in the Shiva, and wouldn't let me leave for about 2 hours until everyone realized had met the president who had come to his son's Shiva. And then the wonderful thing about it was that his second daughter was then trying to get into a program that we don't have at Ben-Gurion University. And again, because it's the first generation of higher education, she really wasn't quite sure how to go about getting accepted if she was borderline. You know, she didn't. And I made a couple of phone calls, and 2 weeks later to another university, I could let her know that she had been accepted. So, you know, these stories went again, and it's similar again and again and again. And the only thing I could be was sort of like an emotional sponge to to absorb, to take on some of their grief onto me. It's the only thing I could do.
I mean, I think it's incredible that you had the emotional fortitude to do that, and you know, you described the father's gratitude. I think that's tenfold that happened, and you know, when the president of a university comes to your child's Shiva house, it's really meaningful and it's really impactful. We have a couple of questions from the audience so far. Again, and I think we're just going to go back and forth on this push and pull between some of the really.
I could tell you, Andrea, that the only time I broke down, though, in the beginning, was not after a Shiva call, but after my visit to the parents of Noah Argamani, who you see here. Because what do you say to a parent whose daughter has been kidnapped to Gaza, and they've seen the video of her screaming, saying, "Please don't kill me, please don't kill me." And he's telling me about his day of looking for her from hospital to hospital until realizing that she'd been kidnapped. How do you, there's no consolation for that. And I got in the car, my driver, and I screamed so loudly because of my, you know, there's just nothing you can say.
That's just really hard. So where do you find your supports from? Your support to so many. Who supports you?
Shira, my wife. And the truth of the matter is, all of you actually support me. I know that sound, no, it's true. I never felt alone in what I was doing. We were both a community in Beersheba, with my driver, with Nirit, who runs my office, with Jeff Kay, who you know, with the rector, with the director general. There was no feeling that anyone was slacking off, more than we were all coming together. And the feedback that I got from supporters around the world gave us, people said, "How could I keep writing?" Anytime someone wrote back and said it was so meaningful to me, that encouraged me to write again.
Thank you for doing that, because I think it really connected us even more so to the university, and to understand the tragedy that maybe the media isn't reporting on. Let's switch gears again. Okay. Students finally went back to school on December 31st. Day, mixed emotions, lots of complexity involved with it. Talk to us a little bit about the climate on campus since the start of the school year, and in particular related to the diverse nature of the student body, and including a large percentage of Bedouin students.
Let me start with the end. We prepared incredibly. We crammed for the idea of Arabs and Jews on campus. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. This has not been an issue. It has not, I mean, everyone is on their best behavior. Everyone realizes that we're on a pile of hay that just one match could ignite it. And that has not been an issue at all. Which is, I'm happy to see, you know, you can never be too prepared, right? You can never be too prepared. And maybe the fact that we were so prepared and we were communicating helped us get past that. So that's number one. Number two, the atmosphere on campus right now is incredible. It is a real BGU feel on campus. The first week was a little subdued, and it was subdued because the students felt guilty for being there. While their classmates were still in reserve. When we started on December 31st, we had 6,000 students in reserve duty. 6,000. Remember, most of those are undergrad, and we have, so let's say we have 18,000 students total. So it was a third of our student body. And the vast majority were in engineering or in sciences. And so there were some places where it's 50, 60% of the student body were in the reserves.
Wow. And do you have
But
a sense of how many are still in reserve
yeah,
on reserve
about
duty?
1,500. Now, many are in reserves. I met one soldier last night. Last night I had a event in our version of the Pentagon, and I was in a place that's, I can't say where, but the fact that I can't say, that gives you an idea of what I was doing or looking at. Think of all the movies that you see with people looking at computer screens, through doors and things like that. And I said, are any of you students? And one woman said, yeah, I am. I said, what are you students? She goes, I'm at Ben-Gurion University. I said, oh, I'm your president. And she's a first-year student in industrial engineering. And she's doing now reserve duty 2 nights a week. And the rest of the time she's on campus studying. And she says she goes, look, first year of engineering is difficult, but I'm managing to get it done because we're being very accommodating. The ones who are not managing to get it done are the ones who are still in battle duty in Gaza as we're speaking. But the atmosphere on campus, today there was a demonstration on campus, demonstrating, about 200 students demonstrated against the university that we haven't been quick enough in giving them answers on which courses are being given in the summer. And they're right, we haven't been quick enough. But the demonstration had a band playing and they were giving out free beer. And that was helping people, it was, if you look at the people who are sitting outside there's a very Ben-Gurion feeling on campus, and the reservists actually ask the students to act normal. They said, the fact that we're not there, you don't have to be in mourning for us. And the ones who come back say, we need this party of the university in order to get back to normal. We don't need to keep, acting sad. We were doing that when we've just spent the past 3 months, crawling around on our knees, eating battle rations. We're here to have fun. There was just a poll done by the student union on whether or not they should have the annual famous Purim party. Now, I know, Andrea, you're new to Ben-Gurion University, but the Purim party at Ben-Gurion University is a nationally known event. It's like Burning Man. And over 80% of the student body voted to have the Purim party. We in the administration thought, oh no, there's no way you can have such a Purim party. The students want a party. They want to get out their attention.
I think that's great, and I very much look forward to the Purim party and hearing all about it. It's interesting. It has been so traumatic, and you talk about the reservists coming back to campus, and they need to feel normal again. They need to do things that students do, like protest, which is normal on university campuses. They need to party. Do you think that the trauma that they've experienced is being effectively dealt with in the fullness of time? What do you think will happen in the coming months?
Well, first of all, remember, I'm not a mental health expert.
Correct.
And we've doubled and tripled our mental health facilities at the university. And there are already a number of students who are saying that they just can't make this switch from doing the things you're seeing on television, like when you saw the video of that incredibly valiant rescue mission, and then the next day being in classes. Most of the battle students have been there for 3 months, 4 months straight. And for many, the transition is difficult. Our services are booked solid. What is going to be the short term and the long term? We don't know, and we have to be very flexible to know about it, how we're going to be going about it. And truth be told, it could be that there are some students who are doing great right now, and it's only going to pop up, next month, the month after. So we don't know.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And that's really the challenge with all of this. Let's backtrack for a minute. I want to talk about what happened on the Eilat campus immediately following October 7th, when you really turned the dormitory there into a makeshift shelter for Israelis. Talk to us about whose idea it was, how did it happen, and what did it mean?
So again, I'd love to say this was my idea and I gave the orders, but I have trouble using that word I. Ami, who is basically the director general of the Eilat campus, took the initiative and opened the dormitories to the people who were being evacuated from the Gaza area. He did call and ask permission. He didn't do it, but of course he got the permission immediately. But the second thing he did was, without permission, at the Eilat campus, we have a culinary school and a large kitchen. He opened up the stores, brought in his cooks, and told them to start cooking. And so all of the food that we had in our supply room within 3 days was given out for free and cooked and supplied meals for I think it was about 250 families who were in our dormitories. And this, again, it was a local initiative because we had no choice. What, you're not going to do that? He'd gotten a phone call from the mayor, and he did it right away. And I have to say, unfortunately, well, the hotels got opened up and they were reimbursed for their loss of payable nights. The government didn't think they need to reimburse the university for lack of payable nights because, there weren't students anyway, but we were paying electricity, cleaning, food, all of those things. But we weren't thinking financially at the time. And when we did the emergency campaign, not a small amount of it was in order to allow us to keep doing things like that. So we also then opened up the campus for 3 schools from the Gaza envelope area. Because once you had thousands of survivors who still needed to send their kids to school. And so our campus became the school, both the elementary and the high school, for the survivors who made it to Eilat. And I think I may have written this in one of my letters when I was touring it. It was from a school, the school that served the Nir Oz kibbutz, as you know, the kibbutz that suffered more than any other kibbutz. And I'm walking around our campus looking at these elementary school kids and imagining what they witnessed on that day, And then they took me on a tour. I went to one classroom and they opened the classroom. It was a 3rd grade classroom. And when we opened the door, surprising them, one of the kids screamed, "Terrorist," pointed at me, and they went running away, hiding, because terrorist is a new game.
That's horrifying. That's a child's
sort of like
response.
Ring Around the Rosie.
Yeah,
And the Black Plague.
It's understandable, but horrifying all at the same time.
But also very healthy, because children, yeah.
That's true. You know what? Listen, you brought up money, so let's switch gears for a minute and talk a little bit about budget. Wars are expensive. There's lots of different things happening in Israel right now. How do you see government budgetary priorities affecting the university?
Is this being recorded?
We'll edit this part out.
Yeah, the government is AWOL. The government was AWOL for the first 3 weeks, first month of the war. In every Shiva call that I went to, and there were over 30 Shiva calls. So someone asked me if there were so many killed, why was it only 35 Shiva calls? Because some of them were for 5 people at a time. Okay, just so, yeah, it really was every Shiva call. One of the things we are doing, I'll give you, it's a very relevant question because of the demonstration that we had today at the university. One of the things we want to do is to duplicate the first semester during the second semester and duplicate the second semester during the summer so that anyone who was late joining the academic year can catch up. At any given time or during the course of the year, I think we are giving over 2,000 classes at Ben-Gurion University. Now, we don't need to duplicate every class in class, but we want to duplicate every class that is what we call blocking class, like calculus or introduction to economics or introduction to psychology, that if you don't finish these, you won't be able to go. The government has allocated funds which allow us to duplicate, get this number, 130 classes. And we need to duplicate at least 600 to be able to ensure that everyone will go on to next year. We presented this to the Minister of Education, together with the Chief Reserve Officer, Brigadier General, what our needs were. They agreed to it. They went with that to the Ministry of Finance, and Minister Smotrich denied the request. He has other priorities, and you can read about what those priorities are in the newspaper. So it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. We have a meeting next week with the Prime Minister about this, and we're coming with a very clear budgetary request, and I'm hoping that that promises can be fulfilled. The government is very good at promises, because it goes over very well on the news. I met last night when I was at wherever I was not supposed to be talking about where I was at. I met the Chief Reserve Officer. I said, we've been given 7 million shekels. We need it to be 25 million shekels. If you give us 25 million shekels, now that's for every university. So, we're talking about 400 million shekel total. Then we could do everything you need. And now you can then go back and now look at the news, how many millions of shekels the irrelevant ministries are being funded for. That's the money right there. If we do that, we could ensure that every reservist goes on.
So the government isn't doing what it needs to do. Civil society has clearly stepped up to the plate in an exponential way. I think philanthropists have stepped up to the plate in really incredible ways. And we're grateful here in Canada that we had the shul.
You guys are incredible. Canada is really, Canada is it.
Well, there's no more incredible philanthropist than Israeli-Canadian philanthropist Sylvan Adams, who, well reported in the media, his historic $100 million US gift to Ben-Gurion University. Talk to us a little bit about that. What is it?
First of all, I want to say, in terms of the emergency campaign that we did, and we talked about it a little bit when I was in Toronto 2 months ago, Ben-Gurion University raised more than any other university in the country.
Amazing.
And what that enabled us to do was to triplicate our social services, our psychological services. It enabled us to give we gave financial support over $1,000 to every reservist in the university. We gave financial support to everyone who had been moved out of their home in the university. We gave these dormitories for free in Eilat. We gave dorms for free in Beersheba for medical staffs. The amount of freebies that we were giving out because the government wasn't stepping up is amazing. At the same time, we had to restock. We had to rethink how we're doing security of the university. Today, we purchased 2 satellite phones for the security services of the university, because maybe there will be a situation where everything is out and we need to be in touch. So it's making us be more proactive in our defense of the university. But let me get back to Sylvan. And we would not have been able to do any of that without the incredible support that we've gotten from Canada and from around the world. Sylvan is a unique person. He's signed on the Giving Pledge. He sees philanthropy, giving back to Israeli society, promoting Israeli society as his mission in life, since he's moved to Israel about 10 years ago. He did his first project at Ben-Gurion University 5 years ago, just when I came. He came in with me and he built the Sylvan Adams Sports Center. Sylvan's life had been primarily in Tel Aviv. And as soon as he came to Ben-Gurion University, he fell in love with the Zionist mission of Ben-Gurion University, with the idea that we have to develop the Negev, that without a strong Negev, there won't be a country. Or as David Ben-Gurion said, if we don't stand, or I'm not sure what the exact translation is, we don't make a stand in the Negev, we won't make a stand in Tel Aviv. And after October 7th, at no point was that more clear. The goal of Hamas was to cut off the Negev from the rest of the country, and then from there move into Tel Aviv. So this is now clearer than ever. Sylvan had told me that his future philanthropy in higher education in Israel was only going to be at Ben-Gurion University. And we had been in talks about what we were going to do. Nothing had been finalized yet. After October 7th, he said, I'm willing now to make the commitment, but it's not an emergency funds commitment. None of these funds are for emergency funds. This is for building the future of Ben-Gurion University, which is building the future of the Negev.
You know what, Danny, that's an excellent segue between those two questions about government funding and Sylvan. You talked about the Zionist ideal within the Ben-Gurion University mission and mandate. Does the government acknowledge that? Do they understand that it's not simply funding a university, as important as that is, but it's funding the development of the South?
That's a great question. And I have to go a little bit into what, how the government does not fund Ben-Gurion University. The government funds the Council for Higher Education, and the Council for Higher Education funds each university more or less according to the same standards. We don't get more funding because we're closer to Gaza. There's no criteria which allows them to do that, just as there's no criteria which allows them to fund Haifa because it's closer to Lebanon. So the challenges that we have will never be met by the government, but need to be met through philanthropy. The government in normal days does support us enough to pay our salaries, to pay electricity, to do the basic working of the university. But any dream that we have, or any special needs that we have to find our own resources.
So that's an excellent segue to philanthropy and the $1 billion campaign to really, the comprehensive campaign to build the northern campus in Beersheba. Talk to us a little bit at a very high level of this plan, what it means, and even more fundamentally than what it means, why it matters.
Okay, so let's go back to Ben-Gurion. Sorry, I always go back to him. The future of Israel will arise from the Negev. We all know that. But for the Negev to truly succeed, Beersheba, first of all, has to become a cosmopolitan metropolis, which will attract people like my children to want to build their futures there, rather than them being attracted to be in Tel Aviv area, or some of them in Haifa and Jerusalem. You know, very unfortunately, the very few people still choose to live in Beersheba. They come back to Beersheba because they were brought up there, or they don't have any other financial choice. The largest employer in the Negev, in Beersheba, is Ben-Gurion together with Soroka Hospital. You know, as I say in my, if you go to any other university and cut it out of the map, like a Tel Aviv University, you cut it out of the map of Tel Aviv and move it to Palo Alto, it has no effect on Tel Aviv. But if you cut Ben-Gurion University out of Beersheba and move it to Alberta, Canada, the entire ecosystem of Beersheba falls apart. We own the only high-tech park in the Negev. And of that high-tech park, 80% of the 3,000 engineers are our graduates. We are the source of new people coming to Ben-Gurion, to the Negev, and then they demand better education, they demand better culture, and then this makes a more of a cosmopolitan city. The biggest effect that we see now on Beersheba is that because of Ben-Gurion University, the Israel Defense Forces made the active decision to relocate the elite intelligence units adjacent to Ben-Gurion University. They didn't put them in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere. They didn't put them in Dimona or in Yerucham or in Eilat. They put them walking distance to the university so that there could be an exchange of ideas, so that the soldiers could do degrees at Ben-Gurion University. This increase would then enable us to hire more people, bring up more population to the Negev. Their spouses of the senior officers would maybe be our employees, and it will redefine what the Negev is going forward. There's an entire new neighborhood being built north of Ben-Gurion University. I think it's about 2,500 units that is slated only for Army housing. Not for Army, for Army people. And it will have, the first Army neighborhood in Israel is a neighborhood in Tel Aviv called Sahala, which is now one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Tel Aviv. At the time, it was outside, and they put Moshe Dayan, and they put all of the officers there. They did the same thing in Rosh Ayin. That's where Benny Gantz lives, in a neighborhood of all officers. And now they're going to do the same thing in Beersheba. And that would not have happened without Ben-Gurion University. But for that to happen, we have to double the size of our campus. The Marcus family campus is full. There's nowhere for us to expand. And I'll just give you one example. We are now doubling the size of our computer science faculty. In order to deal with all of these, take advantage of all of these incredible intelligence officers, we're going to increase the size of the computer science department from about 35 faculty members to 60, and of all the computer science together from around 70 to 120. If you think about that, each of those professors has a lab with 10 graduate students and 3 technicians. So from 120, now we've gone to another 1,000 computer scientists. And if even 10% of those build their companies in Beersheba, what is the effect?
That's amazing. You articulate it so well. It's about a university, but it's really about the future of the Jewish state. And that's a vision that I think we all feel very compelled and motivated by to contribute to. And I think that's why in Canada, we did so well with the emergency campaign, and why we are really excited to help you and help the university achieve the $1 billion goal. It's big, it's bold, it's audacious, but it's also what's needed. And that's what we're
I want to quote Sylvan. He said, why 1 billion? It could be easily 2 billion.
Amazing. Little more work, no pressure though, right, Danny?
Right.
Let's switch gears for a minute. Let's talk a little bit about anti-Semitism, and a two-part question, if I may. The first is just an understanding of how the anti-Israel sentiment that exists out there is affecting BGU and BGU academics in particular. And then the second question, and this is a bit of a personal one for me, because I was really surprised when I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago. And after everything that Israelis have gone through, what they wanted to talk to me about was anti-Semitism here in Canada. And they were very caring about it and very concerned. And I'm just curious to understand from your perspective whether BGU or really any Israeli university has a role to play in helping to combat anti-Semitism.
Well, that's a lot of questions wrapped into one.
It was two.
First of all, all the universities are now being affected. There are some universities which I've gotten a letter from a university in Belgium, from a university in Italy, that have told from a university in the United States that they will no longer collaborate with us because of our colonialist, settler, expansionist, genocidal policies in Gaza. There are scientists or academics who are refusing to write letters of recommendation for our faculty members. There was one from the University of Pennsylvania, a scientist, a well-known scientist, who said, I highly respect the work done by so-and-so, but I refuse to help your institution anymore, so I will not be giving you a letter of recommendation for you.
Wow.
And this is going to be gathering steam. Some of you know the story, my story, when I went to visit Columbia University in December, right before I came to Toronto. I had a meeting with the vice president, and 5 minutes before the meeting, while I was waiting in the office, the meeting was canceled. They didn't say because you're Israeli, we don't. They made up a very lame excuse, but that's not how it's never happened to me. On the other hand, my new vice president for global development, for global engagement, Professor Michal Bar-Sigal, who you have to come visit you guys, is arranging a academic trip to us to the United States. And of all universities, the university that has been most wanting us to come visit and start a new relationship is the University of Pennsylvania. And there are many universities which did not fall under this anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist attacks. Arizona State University, high among them. University of Pittsburgh, highly among them. So, and there's many others. So it's not all black. There's a lot of, but we need to understand, and I try to watch North American news. If I did not understand the situation, we don't look so good right now on television. The situation now, as opposed to what was going on November 1st, I can understand the criticism of what, because it doesn't look so good. And we do have to admit that a large number of Gazans have been killed. Now, this is not a war crime, but it goes against anything that in North America you're used to seeing. CNN frontline news is a shooter in a church shooting one person. So these are numbers that's very difficult to deal with, and we have to be very understanding of that. So for one university, who I'm very close with, they said, we would rather you visit when things are calmer so that it's a productive visit. And it's not out of anti-Semitism. It's out of protecting themselves and protecting us. And we have to be very sensitive to that. But getting back to how you said that we're worried about you. And the truth of the matter is we are. All Israelis are. Having grown up in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, anti-Semitism was not a shock to me. But it was a shock to most native-born Israelis who didn't think that anti-Semitism actually existed anymore. And I think it was a shock for many of you who maybe had gotten comfortable thinking that I can be an American Jew or a Canadian Jew, just like there could be a Canadian, an Irish Canadian, or an Italian Canadian, or a Haitian Canadian, Chinese Canadian. And that maybe we were over classic anti-Semitism. And October 7th has shocked us into this reality that B'kol dor v'dor, in every generation, whether we want it or not, anti-Semitism rears its head, and it's not because of us. There are Jews who continue to think that if Israel wasn't around, there'd be no anti-Semitism. That if we would, anti-Semitism does not need an excuse. I knew that as a kid. But this is showing us that again and again, and it's shocking. I think it's causing Jews primarily in North America, because European communities were different, to reassess themselves. I'll use the word America, or no, Andrea, do you describe yourself as a Canadian Jew or as a Jewish Canadian? And has that changed pre and post October 7th? Are you an adjective that you're a Jewish Canadian, or are you a noun that you're a Canadian Jew? And when I've asked my friends this question, invariably, for many of them, that has changed. They thought they were an adjective, but they've realized that whether they want to be or not to be, they're a noun. And that they feel a stronger identity with other Jews around the world than with their neighbors, their friends, who don't understand them the way that they expected them to.
Yeah, I think it's been a really complicated and for those of us of a particular generation, a really painful, eye-opening experience as to how we're perceived within society. I went out and bought a Magen David. I didn't have one, and I did a couple of weeks ago. I felt the need to proudly display my Jewishness.
So I made Aliyah, so I would not have to wear the chai that I got for my bar mitzvah anymore.
There you go. There you go. Listen, our time is running a little short. I think you've done a great job of
thank you
helping us to understand the complexities.
You've
of the
come
situation.
on at a great time, Andrea, I have to say.
Oh yeah. No, it really is actually, because I think from my perspective, those of us who work for BGU Canada and those of us who volunteer and those of us who give, I think we do because BGU is a great university, but we buy into the Zionist imperative. And that's what separates BGU from all other universities. And after October 7th, that has just become even more clear, and more people now understand and realize it. So it's a difficult time to onboard to a new organization, but it is such an important time, and I'm really excited to be here. But I want to talk about you. You've made time for us. You've made time for your numerous responsibilities running a major university, and you've made time for the people who have been most affected by the crisis. You've made time to communicate with us here in Canada, and some people communicated in the chat wanting me to pass on our real appreciation to you for taking the time to write to us and taking the time to share your pretty raw emotions at the time, and continue to talk about it today. So we're grateful for the kind of leader that you are and the kind of Jew that you are. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Thanks to all
I
of
do
you.
just want to, thank you. I do just want to put in a couple of plugs for some upcoming events, because BGU Canada, certainly our raison d'etre is about raising money for the university, but we also want to take opportunities to add value into Canadian Jewish communities. So stay tuned for 2 upcoming events. The first is that we're going to be doing another movie premiere, Irina's Vow. It's coming to Toronto, to Montreal, to Ottawa, and to Winnipeg. We'll be selling tickets shortly. They do sell out fast. So when you get the email, my recommendation is that you don't delay, but you purchase them right away. We'll also be commemorating International Women's Day with a special webinar on March 7th, featuring an important discussion about Israeli women in the shadow of October 7th. And it's really fitting that Danny had Noah Argamani's picture as part of his background, because we will be honoring her on that day. So I hope you'll be able to join us for these important and interesting events. I thank you all very much for your commitment to BGU, and for making the time to participate in today's webinar. Thank you so much, and have a great day.